We will have another floor round slightly later on in the evening. But to get back to our main debate, we have a speaker who really does need no introduction this evening. A world-renowned evolutionary biologist and one of the most famous critics of religion there is, Professor Richard Dawkins.
Mr. President, thank you. I must apologise to begin with for a sudden attack of clergyman's throat, which I've been trying to cure by sucking cough sweets, and I hope my voice doesn't give out before the end of my statutory 10 minutes. I'm not going to be talking about moral issues. Others have and will. I'm going to be talking as a scientist, passionate about scientific truth. So I won't say I don't really care whether religion has moral good effects or not. I do. But what I care about tonight, at least, is it true? And is it true really matters to a scientist? And I think it's almost a moral case that truth actually is important. My text is taken from the book of Psalms. The heavens declare the glory of God, and the firmament showeth his handiwork. That's the kind of God I could go for, the kind of God I would have gone for if I'd lived before Darwin, the kind of God I did go for as a young man when I was, as St. Paul said, when I was a child. I spake as a child, I understood as a child. How does it go? But when I became a man, I put away childish things. I could go for a God whose primary business was to create the cosmos, to set up the laws of physics, to twiddle the knobs that fine-tune the physical constants in such a way as to foster the eventual emergence of biological evolution. Such a God, a grand God, the God of the cosmos, the God of the physicist, the God the hypermathematician, God the master architect, that would be a God worth worshipping. Probably not worth praying to, for that sort of cosmic God, worthy of proper reverence and respect, would have better things to do than bother himself with the trivia of human prayers and human sins and human preoccupations. The sort of God I would not feel like worshipping would be one who, far from fixing his thoughts on his magnificent creation, was instead obsessed with sin. Sin, 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 sin. The obsession of the Christian God. Interested in nothing but the sins, including private acts, which do nobody else any harm, of the members of one particular species of old world primate. On one small planet, orbiting one rather small star amid 100 billion stars, somewhere in the outer suburbs of one ordinary galaxy among 100 billion galaxies. Such delusions of grandeur, to think that a God with 100 billion galaxies on his mind would give a tuppenny damn who you sleep with. or indeed whether you believe in him. Yet the God of the Christians is supposed to have cared so much about the sins of this one species of old world African ape that he sent his own son, or himself, depending on your theology, into earth, down, whatever that means to earth, as a blood sacrifice, a divine scapegoat, in order to be tortured and killed for the sins of the world, or even the sins of one particular man, Adam, who, as we now know, never existed. A somewhat empty gesture to die for the sins of somebody who never existed. But although modern sophisticated theologians, of course, don't actually believe in Adam, they do still seem to pay lip service to the idea, more than lip service, rather strong service, to the idea of original sin. We are suffused with sin. We're born in sin. We are sinful unless we plead forgiveness. That is not a very humane, not a very pleasant, not a very moral doctrine. And I think that the idea of the blood sacrifice is perhaps even worse. I'm mentioning only Christianity because that's the only religion I know well. It's part of my culture. I'm a cultural Anglican. Grateful, by the way, to be a cultural Anglican when you look at the competition. If I were a cultural Muslim, I'd probably have something to say about that faith's appalling treatment of women, appalling attitude to women, as well as various other moral points. But I want to go back to the God that I said I could go for, God the physicist, God the mathematician, God the all-wise cosmologist, God the immortal knob twiddler, who knows to the umpteenth decimal place the exact value of every physical constant, how it needs to be set in order to bring a lasting universe into existence which is capable of giving rise to life and eventually, perhaps, to us. The heavens declare the glory of, well, something. The fact of your own existence is perhaps the most astonishing fact you'll ever be asked to confront. Think about it. The laws of physics, which just tell you how atoms interact with each other, how fields, how forces interact with each other, have somehow managed to give rise to trees and kangaroos and monkeys and bush babies and us, a species capable of having a brain big enough to reflect on our own existence and work out where we came from and why. That's a pretty glorious thought, and we're at the center of it. Think how a camera salesman might advertise your eyes. You have two elegantly designed cameras in your head, both with ball and socket mounting, so they can be instantly swiveled in any direction and track a moving target. Each can sharply focus an image on a 5-megapixel screen with trichromatic coding for full color vision. It has continuous autofocus from infinity to just a few inches. It has an auto-stopping iris diaphragm that can handle many orders of magnitude of luminosity change. It's a dual-mounted system with sophisticated computer hardware and software in the brain to bring into register the two images and form a stereoscopic images. I mean, what an astounding fact that is. And we now know how it came about. We know that it came about by a purely mechanical, automatic process. There was no design. Yes.
Lara Kaplan, Emmanuel College. Science has previously said that they know how things come about in the development of science, and it's been proven wrong as well. And Charles Darwin has even said himself that his theory of evolution isn't complete. And I was just wondering what you would have to say about that.
Well, it would not be much of a scientific theory if in the 19th century it was complete. Of course it wasn't complete, and of course those of us in the early 20th century and the late 20th century and indeed the 21st century have done enormous amounts to enlarge and improve Darwin's theory, but Darwin would recognize it as his own. It's one of the glories of science that it does, of course, advance, it does change. No scientist would ever wish to claim that it's absolutely finished, and I'll be coming on to that. The explanation for the existence of things like eyes is almost laughably simple, but it had to wait for the 19th century before we got a clue as to how it came about. Before Darwin, it would have taken, indeed did take, a great philosophical mind to spot that the argument from design, the argument that says because it screams design at you, therefore there must have been a designer, that is a deeply fallacious argument. It doesn't explain anything, because the designer himself or herself or itself would have to have been himself a highly complicated object, a highly sophisticated object in order to achieve that level of design. Now, as the interrupter has just pointed out, we don't know everything. There are gaps. Theologians have long, good theologians at least, have long pointed out that we should not, as theologians, put our trust in the God of the gaps. That's a theological point, and it's a very valid one, because gaps shrink as science advances. There are still gaps. There's a gap in the origin of life. There's a gap in the origin of the cosmos. These gaps are now steadily being filled, and no sophisticated theologian would put his faith in these gaps. The whole lesson from the theological criticism of the God of the gaps argument is that you cannot resort to a designer as an explanation for anything, given that the task the designer is asked to do requires his own designer at least as complicated and sophisticated. The lesson from Darwin is that because the really difficult problem of explanation has already been solved by Darwin, the remaining gaps that need to be solved are relatively easy. Physics may await its Darwin, but it will come. There are many reasons why religion has no place. I'm concluding now. There are many reasons why religion has no place in the 21st century, and my colleagues will deal with them or have dealt with them. To a scientist, however, what's really objectionable about religion is that it fosters the idea that we should be satisfied with a non-explanation to a difficult question instead of working hard. It's hard work, working hard to provide a real explanation. Religious explanations are supernatural, but in no possible sense is a supernatural explanation for anything an explanation. It's a cop-out, a betrayal of the intellect, a betrayal of all that's best about what makes us human, a phony substitute for an explanation which seems to answer the question until you examine it and realize that it does no such thing. Religion in science is not just redundant and irrelevant, it's an active and pernicious charlatan.
On that point.
I've got to conclude now. I'm already over time. It peddles false explanations, or at least pseudo-explanations, where real explanations could have been offered and will be offered. Pseudo-explanations that get in the way of the enterprise of discovering real explanations. As the centuries go by, religion has less and less room to exist and perform its obscurantist interference with the search for truth. In the 21st century, it's high time, finally, to send it packing.
Thank you, Professor. Continuing the case for the opposition is a renowned writer and professor of Islamic studies at Oxford. He's president of the European Muslim Network and has been known as the Muslim Martin Luther. Professor Tariq Ramadan.
Thank you. I was surprised by the fact that what I got as a question is that religion has no place in the 21st century, and all the arguments that I got right now were not talking about the question itself, and only concluding on the fact that because we have this idea of truth, the way you think we are thinking about truth from a religious viewpoint or from within the organized religion, we should hope that religions will disappear in the 21st century and have no place. So the argument itself for someone who is a scientist is not very scientific and much more driven by passion, as if there is something which is behind all the scientific arguments, is more passionate than rooted in arguments. And it's exactly the same with what I heard in the first speech. For Muslims or for Christians or for organized religions, the fact that we think that morality has a transcendental source doesn't mean that we dehumanize morality. This is not an argument. This is dangerous. A dangerous conclusion, not a scientific one. So let me come to something which I think it's so important for us today when it comes to religions. In fact, religions as faith, as knowledge itself, or as rituals are for organized religions means. And the means, you can use them in a way or in another. You can use them for the good and you can use them for the bad. It's not because we have people from within an organized religions that sometimes are instrumentalizing religion that we should forget everything which is coming from within the organized religion and understand what was said, the sources of morality, the way we deal with human dignity, the way we deal with the way we have to deal with our own self. And it's very important. You cannot dismiss the point that within the organized religion, there is a very deep understanding of the concept of human being, what it means to be a human being. It's not only coming from Socrates, it's also coming from a very old religious tradition and a very deep understanding of what is shared in a universal way, which has to do with the way we deal with our heart, our body, and our mind. And the point is that what we get from the organized religion is also something which is very important. At the end of the day, what is good is what you are going to do with yourself. And what is bad is the way you are going to do with yourself. It's a personal responsibility. And in the 21st century, it's something that we have to listen to and at least to respect. And the point for me is this one. If we look at the challenges ahead, the 21st century, we have lots of knowledge, technology, and sciences. And at the end of the day, we have lots of means. But there are critical questions about the ends. What do we want to achieve? And this is the time where we need philosophy and religions and humanists all together to come and to deal with this. We need a pluralistic discussion on this, not humanists telling us we don't need you. If you are truly humanist, you know, please, I'm sorry, I have lots of things to say, so... and I heard because I heard so many things. So the only right humanistic position would be for you to say, I disagree with you from the organized religions, but we need you to have these pluralistic discussions on the ends and the finalities, to use philosophical discussion, not to tell us in the name of our humanism, disappear. Is this humanism? This is dogmatic rationality. It's as dogmatic as a new religion, as the old religion. Yes, it is. So, my point here is to say something which is essential, which was said by Dr. William. It's so important. Yes, the contemporary world, our 21st century, needs religions to be involved in this discussion, because at the end of the day, what is coming from the organized religions, of course, we will find people, and we can keep on having anecdotes about 7/7 and Inquisition. You will always find in history something to prove your point. But at the end of the day, you have to look at the other side of what religions, organized religions, provide our humanity with. And this is something which is also important. In our century, what we need is a discussion, a deep discussion about the ends, in order to come to talk about the human dignity. But I would say that religions need what is happening now in the 21st century. And we have to engage with religions. And all what you are saying is not about sitting down and saying this religion, and to essentialize religions by saying they are bad with women, they are bad with this, they did this. That's not a discussion. That's ridiculous. It's not going to be the answer to our discussion today. The answer to our discussion is, let us engage with religions and let us engage with dogmatic rationality and scientism, in a way which is telling us what are the ends, what do we want to achieve. What I want from within an organized religion is you. I need you, by the way. I need you. Because you are helping me to deal with my own fellow brothers and sisters in the religious communities, to say, I don't want people to instrumentalize my religion. I don't want formalism. I don't want dogmatism. I want you to challenge me in order for me to come back to my religious brothers and sisters in humanity as well, to be able to come with a better understanding. And you know what? You need me. You need us, in order not to come to this arrogant attitude to look at people, because implicitly in all you are saying, there is a superiority complex. The way you deal with religions is we are backward. And we need each other because we are not facing the world the way it is. And I think that this is problematic. Because what I see in this, it's dogmatism. I don't know where I am in my time. So I would say that in this discussion today, when we need each other and we have to engage with religion, it's also to come in this discussion in the 21st century to question the very essence of religion. And, okay. You have 15 seconds.
If you say we need to engage in an open discussion with both religious people and atheists, then what would you say to the prolific record of all religions in the past and today evangelizing, trying to convert people to their own beliefs, and also educating children, and not just their own children, but also others in religious schools, trying to convince them and teach them that that is the one true way to believe?
I think that... You are exactly explaining my point. This is what I said, that you will always find people within religious, organized religions trying to convince and trying to convert people. But I would tell you that it's exactly the same with some atheists. They want to convert people to atheism. That is the same. And I think that at the end of the day, what is important, what I am expecting from you, as I am expecting from any human being, is to be the witness to his philosophy in his daily life. So if you are an atheist and you have principles, show me your principles. If you are a religious, show me your principles. Don't try to convert me, show me who you are, instead of trying to convince me that I'm wrong and that my truth should disappear from history. Anyone who wants someone to disappear from history, religious thoughts or philosophical thought, is dangerous, because this is dogmatism. This is dangerous. Behind it, this is a new way of dealing with power. My conclusion is to say, if I come to what is needed to our world today, to our world today in the contemporary world, is very much to look at what religions can provide us with. And when, for example, and you know, in organized religion, it's not only something which has to do with community, it has to do with community, and it has to do with individuals. So when it comes to something that I learned from within a tradition, I'm dealing with scientific truth, philosophical truth, and I'm acknowledging the fact that we don't have one final answer, and even Richard Dawkins cannot prove that God doesn't exist. So when he doesn't prove this, let us come to what is our way of life. In religious traditions, we find a way of educating yourself, know who you are and not only what you have, something which is very needed in our consumerist societies, that we need something which is questioning the very end and purpose of our human life. And I think that if we don't take this as something which is the religious contribution to a philosophical and needed discussion on ethics, for example. I don't care about the source of morality. I want to talk about morality, meaning about ethics, about the fact that we need ethics in politics, ethics in economy. And why do you want me to disappear from the discussion because I'm coming from an organized religion? Don't do that. Just say, welcome to the discussion. So my conclusion is, if you are faithful to your humanistic position, you should be against the motion. Thank you.